Evening, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion on women in the legal profession in India, jointly hosted by the University of Oxford and the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. I'm Dhwani Mehta. I work at Vidhi, and I also studied at Oxford, as did several of my Vidhi colleagues. So it's really special for us to be able to host this event with Oxford University. We've come a long way from the time that Cornelia Sorabji, India's first woman lawyer, had to ask for special permission to read in a library at Lincoln's Inn, or when the late Justice Leela Seth, the first woman Chief Justice of a High Court in India, was asked by her colleagues to take on the tea arrangements for celebrations in court. The very fact that it's still important and relevant to have a discussion like this today, though, shows that there's still a lot of progress to be made on gender diversity. I think it reminds us of what Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said when she was asked about women's representation on the Supreme Court. She said, there'll be enough women on the Supreme Court when there are 9. The University of Oxford recognizes the importance of advancing gender representation. It has a Women in Law initiative which allows women lawyers to create networks, to be informed of each other's experiences, and to discuss leadership development and career advancement strategies. At Vidhi, as a legal policy think tank, we also understand the powerful role that empirical research can play in uncovering the exclusion in our public institutions. So Vidhi has a judicial reforms initiative which has done has gathered some revealing data on the gender composition of the lower judiciary, a somewhat neglected area of research. And now we're extending this to a study on gender diversity in the bar as well. And we hope that this kind of research prompts more questions about why we have poor gender diversity, and what we can do to address it. So we hope that today's discussion will remind us why this is a subject that should matter so much to us, and also help us discuss some of the measures that are needed to address this. We're delighted to have a diverse panel to discuss these issues, both in terms of gender as well as their chosen field of the legal profession, covering the bar, bench, and academia. I'll just explain how today's event is going to work. We're going to begin with a keynote speech by Justice Sikri of the Supreme Court of India. And so before moving on to the panel discussion, before I invite him on to speak, I'd like to briefly introduce him to the audience. Justice Sikri was appointed to the Supreme Court on the 12th of April, 2013. He served previously as Chief Justice of the Punjab and Haryana High Court, and was appointed a judge of the High Court of Delhi in 1999. He enrolled as an advocate in 1997 with the Bar Council of Delhi, where he's practiced in all kinds of matters: constitutional, labor, service, and arbitration. He has a distinguished academic record and numerous publications. He's been a part-time lecturer at the Campus Law Center at Delhi University, and also a vice president of the Delhi High Court Bar Association. He's been a part of some landmark judgments that the Supreme Court has delivered, and I think particularly important for today's discussion, the Nalsa judgment, which recognized the importance of making our laws gender inclusive. We're delighted to have him here today, and could I please invite you up to begin today's discussion with your keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening to all of you. Let me say at the outset that I'm really impressed and intrigued by this initiative which is taken by Vidhi in collaboration with the Oxford University. It is a very relevant topic, and I think this is one topic which has remained relevant in last 100 years, and we don't know for how much more years in future it would remain relevant. And as it was pointed out that how many judges in US Supreme Court, and the answer was that till the time there are all 9 judges. So till the time this gender equality comes up in real terms in this world, and particularly in India, I think the topic would remain relevant for all times discussed, and at all times it can be discussed, and it would be as if there is a fresh thinking on that. Not that society has not moved or there is no progress in this direction, but every time when we discuss such aspects, we still feel that we are lagging behind and we have hardly achieved anything. Let me congratulate Vidhi for bringing out or carrying out this empirical research on this women in the legal profession in India. It's the statistics as well as representation is concerned, which I'll be referring to in a very, briefly, shortly. But what I feel is that, look, how relevant it is when we talk of legal women in legal profession. Let me say I'm reminded of when I was acting Chief Justice in Delhi High Court. A petition was filed before us. Of course, it has nothing to do, I'm only drawing the parallel. It was about child labor. That in spite of the fact that there is a law prohibiting child labor, but this practice is prevalent all around. Even, not only in the houses, domestic helps, these children are engaged, but in factories also and various other places, all that statistics was given. But what was shocking to us, sitting inside the High Court and doing justice in child labor, one instance was cited that, look, just in your High Court only, when those kiosks are there, where, there are various, these are for those who sell different kinds of, maybe, say, refreshments or stationery or any other thing. There are 5 or 7 or 10 kiosks are there. And the child labor is employed there also. So inside your High Court, where you're talking of this, abolition of child labor, it starts from here, which is the temple of justice and doing justice. That is what I wanted to draw parallel by giving this example, that courts are meant for doing justice. Article 14 is there in our constitution, which talks of equality. It's a part of universal human rights, which is always recognized. And it is the legal fraternity which enforces these rights. Whenever there is a right, there is gender violation and any harm is done to any female and she has to come to the court, it is the legal profession which brings the causes to the court so that the court is able to do justice to her. And here we are talking what is happening in this profession itself, be it starting from the education, be it the educational institutions, there the position of women, be it the legal profession, or even the judiciary. So what is the treatment in the process we are giving to this gender when the institutions are meant to enforce gender justice? This is the irony. And therefore, I think that is why I said that I really compliment Vidhi for undertaking this exercise. And as you have said, which one is this? So some statistics of women at the bar in that in the research which is carried out by Vidhi. It says that in lower judiciary, there are only 10%, in the lower judiciary, yes, 10% of advocates who are estimated to be women. Number of women as senior advocates in the Supreme Court drops to 2.9%. That was in March 2016. Many advocates have spoken of glass ceiling, which very much exists today in respect of appointments and promotion processes of women. And even in the lower judiciary, it's still male dominated. In Supreme Court from 1950 up to now, in 68 years, only 8 female judges have been appointed. Of course, fortunately, as of today, and I won't say fortunately, it is only in comparison with what has been happening. And we have 3 women judges, which again, I would say is quite dismal. when I come to the other aspects of it, the facets, and why there are some of the reasons which I have seen as an advocate and then as a judge for now almost 19 and a half years, what are the reasons? According to me, I'll dwell on that, and we'll discuss in the panel discussion also. And so there are these kinds of reports which are given, and this presents even today a very dismal picture. Now, I actually go back to, say, 40 years ago when I joined profession, and say maybe let me go back for 43 years ago when I joined LLB course. I remember in those days, there used to be very, very few women lawyers or women students, and naturally those who would become lawyers ultimately. And I met a girl, one of the girls, I'm sharing the experience, and she told me, she was my class fellow, who happens to be my wife today. So even she had to struggle to get admission in law because her family was not accepting. And this is one of the social problems in those days. It may not be today. And she confided in me when we became friends at other level, boyfriend and girlfriend. She said that unfortunately she had lost her father when she was 17 or 18 years of age. So she said that one of my uncles says that, look, if she goes to law college, we have this apprehension, she may fall into some love affair with somebody, and that is not good. And therefore, that may not be the reason. And ultimately, as if sending her to law school is going to give her so much of freedom, which should not be given to women. So that was in her family. This is what I came to know from her and the first-hand experience. Of course, the family feels pride in what she has done over a period of time, but that these periods may have changed. But then, one of my uncles says that, look, if she goes to law college, we have this apprehension, she may fall into some love affair with somebody, and that is not good. And therefore, that may not be the reason. And ultimately, as if sending her to law school is going to give her so much of freedom, which should not be given to women. So that was in her family. This is what I came to know from her and the first-hand experience. Of course, the family feels pride in what she has done over a period of time, but that these periods may have changed. But then, even teachers who used to be maybe one or two at that time, or three or four teachers, lady teachers, the number has grown substantially. What is the reason for this? If we see, apart from anything that just girls, they want to come to legal profession and they want to have legal education, etc., is one thing. But then, today, in most of the law schools, and particularly national law schools, admission is merit-based. Unlike our times, when it used to be said that law course should be taken as a matter of last resort. If you're not able to get admission in any other discipline, you come to law and take admission. But today, it's a conscious choice. And when there is a competitive examination, these girls are appearing in that exam and are faring better than male students. That is why they are more in numbers. I give you another example of lower judiciary, which I have seen. And same thing applies to as far as female teachers are concerned, their appointments, etc. When it comes to, I have seen when I was in the High Court, and we used to have the recruitment of judicial officers in the lower judiciary. Because in India, as far as lower judiciary is concerned, at two levels, we call it judicial service and higher judicial service. And at lower judicial service, the entry is only by competitive examination. And at higher judicial service, it is promotion from the lower judiciary and from the bar. But there again, competitive examination. 2 or 3, when I was in charge of the selection committee in the High Court, and I found in three batches where I made the recruitment as in charge, I think 70%, the total number of persons selected, 70% out of them were women or girls. In one of the batches, I still remember that statistics which I used to say, therefore I remember that statistics which I have narrated so often. Out of 36 judges appointed, 26 were girls. Among these 26, first 5 were in the merit list. First 5 were women, and in first 10, 8 were women. So when it comes to what I'm trying to emphasize is, when it comes to making selection on merit, they are outshining the boys. And it starts not only here. If you see even our CBSE results, I think I'm now, we must be, all of us must be observing for last 30, 40 years. The girls have always been doing better than the boys. So whether it is admission in the law schools, whether it is in the lower judiciary, and therefore this, as far as lower judiciary is concerned, let me tell you, in future, in 10 or 15 years' time, this complexion is going to be changed. Because today, some appointments which were made 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and they are still judicial officers. But in last 5 or 7 years, and what I'm telling you about Delhi, I have observed in other states also. As Chief Justice of Punjab and Haryana High Court, same trend I saw. I had been going to other, in lower judiciary in other states, almost same trend I have been seeing. Maybe, exception maybe, because you have been doing empirical research, you know better. Exception maybe few high courts. But most of the high courts, this is the position. And therefore, as far as lower judiciary is concerned, over a period of time, as far as representation of the women judges in lower judiciary is concerned, it is going to be better than that of men. But as I said, what I'm trying to emphasize is this is because of their own merit. When it comes to selection of judges in the High Court and Supreme Court, and when women are good at that level, it doesn't mean that something happens later on and they are no more good when these women are to be picked up for appointment to High Court and Supreme Court. So what are the reasons? We will discuss all this. There are some which are in my mind. In the panel discussion, we will be discussing. But that is not happening only in India. I tell you, 3 weeks ago only, I was in Yale Law School. And it was a conference on human rights. Of course, there were from 13 or 14 countries, there were judges, but rest of the, maybe about 35 to 40 were the law professors from Yale Law School and maybe from 1 or 2 other universities. And we had good discussions. I'm not talking about that. But before that, out of these judges who had come from various jurisdictions, 5 were women judges. So there was one talk in one of the mornings with the students of Yale Law School, where those 5 women judges discussed as to what kind of difficulties being women they face while discharging their duties as judges. And these judges were one from Canada, one from France, no, not from France, France was a male judge. Yes, one from France also, and one, of course, from America, she was there, one from Germany. So even these countries, and they actually at that time had said that, look, 2 or 3 remarks which they made and which are still fresh in my mind. They, of course, narrated their experiences as women judges and what kind of hurdles they are facing. They said that we have seen that law affects female in a different way than males. US. So she said that, look, when the matter is being argued and something is to be dictated or decided, sometimes the senior judge or the presiding judge would not even look at me, would not discuss with me. He would be discussing with his other colleagues, who are the male colleagues. So I had to assert myself that, look, and she said that I had to put my foot down, that you can't decide a case without discussing me, where the order is to pass in the court itself. And her remark was that, look, you have to be exceptionally good if you want to really make your mark. But why that benchmark for us? If my counterpart, other male judge, who may be an average judge, but he is given some importance, and I may be much better, but I am overlooked. And as example was given, Justice Leela said that, look, because being a judge, so you look after the tea arrangements, etc., whenever there is a function. Of course, this work is given to somebody. Maybe the other judges or the Chief Justice might have thought that being a lady judge, she will be able to perform it better. But this mindset has to change. Even when, whether we talk of advocates in the bar, we talk of teachers in the educational or institutions, or we talk of judges in the court. Yes, we have Justice Indu Malhotra, who has been, of course, judge for a few months, but then she'll be able to narrate her experiences if she is finding some difficulties, some obstacles when it comes to judging, and only because of the reason that she is a lady. But atmosphere is such, there's no doubt about it. This male psyche, that is still there. It is normally thought that, okay, she may not be able to do such kind of work, she should be given some lighter work, and still we have the problems where, even in the, it has come in your research papers itself, which I have seen, talk of advocates in the law firms, etc. They'll say that work which is not very important should be assigned to the ladies. Maybe client may not have that kind of confidence, and even boss doesn't have that kind of confidence. In spite of, that is why I stated in the beginning, in spite of the fact that when entry to this profession or even entry to the law colleges, they have shown their merit, that they are better than their counterparts in many respects. So why this attitude doesn't have to change is the question. And these aspects which you are discussing, maybe there are certain social norms we have not been able to overcome, that mindsets and expectations, etc. So these are some of the issues I think we'll be discussing in the panel discussion. I just, in my keynote address, wanted to flag these issues and wanted to say something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Justice Sikri, for talking about the importance of introspection and also sharing richly from your personal experiences. If I could invite the moderator and the panelists up on stage, I'd like and introduce them to the audience, and then we can move on to the second half of the evening. So we're very lucky to have with us here today the Vice Chancellor of Oxford, Professor Louise Richardson, who served as, who's of course the first woman Vice Chancellor of Oxford and has also been Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of St. Andrews. She's a political scientist by training, and she has degrees from Trinity College, Dublin, as well as UCLA and Harvard. She specializes in international security with a particular emphasis on terrorist movements, and has written widely on international terrorism, British foreign and defense policy, and security institutions. She's won teaching prizes for her work, and is also currently the trustee of serves as a trustee for a number of non-profit groups, including the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Booker Prize Foundation. She's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, and the Academy of Social Sciences in the United Kingdom. We're really grateful that you could be here with us today, Professor Richardson. The other panelists, we have Justice Indu Malhotra, who, as Justice Sikri introduced, is the first woman judge of the Supreme Court to have been appointed from the bench. She enrolled as an advocate in 1983 and did brilliantly at the Advocate on Record examination in 98. She was only the second woman to be designated a senior advocate by the Supreme Court in 2007 after almost 30 years. She's an authority on the law of arbitration and has authored several publications on this subject as well. She's been a member of the Supreme Court Gender Sensitization and Internal Complaints Committee, and we're very, very privileged to have such a wonderful role model here with us today. Thank you, Justice Malhotra. We also have Mr. Arvind Datar, who's a senior advocate appearing in the Supreme Court and the Madras High Court. Mr. Datar joined the bar in 1980, set up independent practice in 1984, and has appeared before the Supreme Court, several high courts, and various tax tribunals. He's also a prolific author. He's authored a commentary on the Constitution of India, is the general editor of a guide to the Companies Act, and along with senior advocate Soli Sorabji, has authored a book on Nani Palkhiwala, the courtroom genius. He's appeared in several landmark constitutional cases, including the National Judicial Appointments Commission case. And most importantly, he's a wonderful mentor, I think, to all young lawyers at the bar today. So thank you very much for being here with us. We also have Dr. Lavanya Rajamani, who's a professor at the Center for Policy Research, where she researches legal issues relating to the environment, particularly international law, climate change, and human rights. She's the author of and has edited several books on international environmental law, also contributing frequently to periodicals and academic journals. She's worked on and analyzed several international climate negotiations since 1998 as a consultant to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat, as a negotiator for the Alliance of Small Island States, and as a legal advisor to the chairs of ad hoc working groups under the Framework Convention. She's also advised governments, including the Indian Ministry of Environment and Forests and the Danish Ministry of Climate Change and the World Bank. She's taught at Queen's College, Cambridge, and Oxford, where she was at Queen's, where she was a university lecturer and then fellow and director of studies in international law, and at Oxford, where she was a junior research fellow. And we're delighted that she's also been appointed to a professorship in international environmental law at Oxford beginning August 2019. She's a personal role model, and we're very glad you could be here today, Lavanya. And we have Ms. Madhavi Goradia Divan, who's an advocate practicing in the Supreme Court of India. She has an honors degree in English from Stephens College, Delhi, and a degree in law from Pembroke College, University of Cambridge. She began her independent practice as a counsel at the High Court of Bombay, and her areas of practice include constitutional law, media law, commercial law, and environmental law. She's also appeared in the landmark constitutional case, the National Judicial Appointments Commission case, the Triple Talaq case, and the WhatsApp privacy case. She's also an author and has authored a book called The Facets of Media Law, which is now widely used by students and media persons and practitioners across India. She was awarded the Woman Lawyer of the Year Award in the Legal Era Awards 2017-2018, as well as the Excellence Award 2018, honoring distinguished service and contribution to media and constitutional laws. She's on the Academic Council of Maharashtra, of the Maharashtra National Law School, Mumbai, and is also the editor of the Indian Advocate, which is the journal of the Bar Association of India. We're really privileged that you could be here today and to share your experience. Thank you. And so I'll hand it over to Professor Richardson now to kickstart the discussion.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, let me just say a few words about Oxford and how delighted my colleagues and I are to be here today. And to point out that Oxford's links with India go back a long way, at least 400 years, since when Thomas Sheldon of New College, Oxford, came to India, the first recorded Englishman to do so. But our links with India have been particularly around the law. Indian students started coming to Oxford in the 1870s, but you just heard a little bit about my favourite Indian student at Oxford, which is Cornelia Sarabji. And the account you got was accurate, but much too fair to Oxford, because the implication was that she was treated badly in India. Well, she was actually treated very badly by us too. She finished top of her class in Bangkok University as an undergraduate, and at the time the British administration would give scholarships to the top students to go to England rather. But of course there were always men, so she didn't get a scholarship, but a group of people got together and secured a scholarship for her so that she could go to Somerville College in Oxford. She came to Somerville and became the first woman to get the BCL degree from Oxford. But it was quite difficult because the lectures were given in Balliol College, and she, of course, was female, and Balliol was all male, so she had to get special dispensation to attend the lectures in Balliol. The books were in the library, the Codrington Library and All Souls College, and of course, heaven forbid that women enter the library, so she also had to get special dispensation to enter the library. And then she did wish to take the exams, but of course no woman, Indian, English or otherwise, had ever taken the BCL exams. So Congregation, which is the governing body of the university, made up of the entire faculty, had to vote a special dispensation to allow her to take the exam. So she took the exam and then came back to India. But of course, she wasn't allowed to collect her degree until 30 years later, because women were not admitted as full members of Oxford until 1920, about 750 years after we were founded. So we didn't rush into women's equality in England or in Oxford either. She had an extraordinary career. She wasn't able to become a barrister until in India until 1923, when that became legal as a female. Went on to become the first female advocate and practiced law in both India and England. So we are enormously proud in Oxford of Cornelia Sarabji, and just wish we hadn't made life so difficult for her when she came. We're also proud of many other Indian links, not least of them the fact that your first Prime Minister, female Prime Minister, studied at Oxford, so not in a role of practicing the law, but in making laws. So, and our connections with India remain very close. We have about 368 Indian students in Oxford today. It's no secret that the number of Indian students attending university in Britain has declined in recent years, but I'm glad to say that has not been the case at Oxford. Our numbers remain firm, and one of the reasons my colleagues and I are here for a few days is actually to make the case that we are still looking for bright young Indian students to come and study at Oxford. So I hope that doesn't sound like a party political broadcast for Oxford. It's really just to express my delight in being here and being in the company of such distinguished jurists. So we've had a wonderful opening speech. Our plan is that we will have a discussion amongst the panel, and then we will open the floor to you to invite you to ask any questions you'd like. But first of all, I think I would like to invite each of the panelists to say a few words, just a few thoughts reflecting on the keynote speech you heard by Justice Sikri, and any thoughts you might have on this subject. So could we maybe turn to you, Justice Malhotra, to start? Okay, thank you. She's rather
Good evening to all of you. I propose to give you all the perspective of a woman lawyer I was a litigator before I got elevated, so I'm going to speak from my experiences as a litigator. I started my practice in 1983, and even though I come from a legal background, I really didn't have a cakewalk. I slogged my way through. I built my practice brief by brief. My father was a senior lawyer, and by the time I entered the profession, he was on the decline. I was the youngest of his 4 children, so he was on the decline. He was a senior advocate, and there was no clientele which I really inherited from him at all. I did have the advantage of a great infrastructure in terms of office space and of a very large library which he had built up over the years. But barring that, I had to actually make my own mark. And it was not so easy. I first took the Advocate on Record exam because I thought that was actually the gateway for women to get noticed in the profession. Because at that time, women were not recognized really as counsel. And I thought that if I did the Advocate on Record examination, it would give me a foothold because you develop a clientele and that gives you the platform to represent your clients. Of course, you start small and then slowly you work your way up. So after about 20 years of practice as an Advocate on Record, I then decided to apply for designation as a senior lawyer. And at that point of time, there were 2 of my friends who were very eminent lawyers at that time, and today they are in very high positions. They both came and they told me with utmost affection and earnestness, don't apply. It's a male-dominated profession, and insofar as counsel practice is concerned, it's going to hit you hard. You built up a big practice as an EOR, but as a counsel, you'll feel very disadvantaged because a client wants a man to represent them and not a woman. So they were insistent, and they said it with a lot of affection. It was bona fide. But despite that, there was something more compelling for me from within. And actually, some of the judges did ask me also to apply. They said, why are you not applying for designation? Because by then, most of my matters, I was not engaging senior counsel. I was appearing myself for quite a few years before I put in my application. I had put in more than 20 years of practice by then. So I did make an application and I was designated after more than 30 years. It was Justice Leela Seth who was the first person to have been designated by the Supreme Court, although she didn't practice in the Supreme Court as such. She was more in the Delhi High Court. And I got designated, and it was a new ladder which I had to start climbing because it was not easy, because all your work as an AOR, you discontinue it and you distribute it around. So you have to start afresh. And it was not easy, because in the beginning, people like to engage you in family law matters, and it's a lot of male clients who want a woman to represent them who will engage you. So that's how it started, and then you get on to smaller matters. Like I had a lot of commercial work as an advocate on record, and then I realized that I was, at the base of the ladder once again. So it was MACT matters, family law matters, and the like, and then land acquisition. And it was only in the last I've been a senior lawyer since 2007, till I got elevated this year in April. And it was in the last 6 years of my practice as a senior counsel that I really actually started moving more and more. I got engaged more in commercial matters. So there has, and believe me, my contemporary male lawyers would certainly command a higher fee than a woman does. And that is the truth of it. I mean, there is no fighting shy of it. That is the truth. But it doesn't matter, because frankly speaking, fees doesn't matter. It's more the appearances and the, more and more complex matters that you get to grapple with, which really teaches you and makes you an all-rounded lawyer. So, and of course, it was in January this year that I was asked for elevation to the Supreme Court, which I did accept, even though I have a short tenure of 3 years. But I did want to transition from a senior lawyer, and I love dispensing justice. I enjoy every moment of it. Although, of course, there is a gender bias. People think that, women judges also are not competent enough to grapple with very, complicated commercial matters. And sometimes a senior judge may just turn around and tell you won't understand. So you have to work twice and thrice as hard to tell him that you do understand and to contribute. So you have to actually, as a woman, really fight it out. You have to struggle your way through and to get noticed, to contribute. So you have to be very attentive. And there is no doubt that you have to work twice as hard as men to reach some kind of, level of your male colleagues. Now, that is a part of my background. Now, there are actually 3 things which I feel the younger women lawyers and all, which they face, which makes it difficult and hard for them to grow. One is, of course, the legal profession is a jealous mistress. It takes up a lot of time. So you need enormous family support to grow, to enable you to practice. Because if you are, and you have to be concerned with rearing a family, the time which you have on your hands is difficult. To maintain a work-life balance is really a challenge. So that is one issue where women find it very difficult to grow because of time constraints and to balance their family life. Another aspect which I find, which I personally actually encountered, I felt that as I grew as an advocate on record, I found that when I had joined the bar, and as time went by, the contours of the legal profession have changed so tremendously. I mean, it's a commercial business. You have to go to MNCs, you have to make presentations to get the business. It's very competitive. You can't just sit back in your office and say it's a noble profession and someone will come around. I remember I was appearing for a very large MNC. So their law officer contacted me. He said, "Madam, you're getting off the hook." I said, "What happened?" He said, "You don't come to our office and make presentations. You should see how your male colleagues come." So the contours of the profession were changing. And frankly speaking, as a woman, I did find it very difficult to go and what they call network to get work business. That is one of the inhibitions which women do have. And I did feel it in the latter years of my practice as an advocate on record when I was running my own firm. Another aspect which I do think that, which is of relevance is that, when governments come to power, there are these positions of additional solicitor general, etc., which open out. And women find it very difficult to go and lobby and get hold of even one of these positions because, first of all, it takes you to a different level. You get tremendous exposure because you are appearing in all kinds of matters before the court. You get more recognition, etc. So, in fact, it was just till 2009, which is 62 years after independence, that the first woman was appointed as an ASG. And that was because the Attorney General had a very high opinion of her intellect and her legal acumen, who really pushed for her to be appointed as the first woman ASG. So, it is right till 2009, we didn't have a single woman in the Supreme Court who had, I don't even think in the high courts where women have been appointed as additional solicitor general, which is the base of these government appointments. So I think these are 3 areas where women do feel discriminated because they feel that they are more inhibited in going out and lobbying for these positions. And these are political posts. There is no doubt about it. These are political positions and they are very useful. They're a good platform to get started off, to get more recognition in the court as an arguing counsel. So these are actually some of my thoughts and experiences. I just thought I would share them with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Malhotra. And now if we could have Madhavi, Divan, Madhavi, sorry. Would you like me? Whatever you're more comfortable with.
Whatever, okay. Actually, till last evening, I was to be a happy member of this audience. And I was looking forward to very intently listening to this very esteemed panel here. And then I get a call all the way from Korea. I've never received a call from Korea. And it was Org-ho who said we need a practitioner on this panel. And I was quite disarmed because I've never received a call from Korea and much less to participate in a panel discussion in Delhi. So I was quite disarmed by that. Here I am. I started practice as a counsel in the Bombay High Court. And counsel, it's something which is not very common in Delhi, but in Bombay we have the dual system of counsels and solicitors. And counsels depend on solicitors for briefing. So we don't go out there and we don't need to lobby with clients, but we depend on solicitors. And this is regarded as a very, very, I think amongst all the various branches of legal practice, I think this is the most male-centric part of the profession, because as Justice Malhotra said, it's eventually when it comes to arguing a brief and facing the judge, generally and traditionally, I think both men and women briefing lawyers have preferred men. And that's, of course, because I think men are regarded as being more, aggression is regarded as a virtue. I think that's on the wane now, but it was traditionally regarded as a virtue. Tenacity, all of these attributes made, women were regarded as less competent or less up to the job. But I didn't know very much about the legal profession and about counsel practice when I decided to take the plunge. I think had I been better informed, I might not have taken that plunge, because I didn't come from a family of lawyers. I had never mooted. I had never done a law internship. I had never stepped into a courtroom, but I had a law degree, and for some reason I wanted to be it just sounded very nice, and I wanted to give it a shot. But it was really a shot in the dark. I think my first recollection of the Bombay High Court, although I was very, very fortunate to have got into a very good chamber, Mr. Dwarkadas was one of the leading commercial practitioners in the Bombay High Court, but my recollection is of the table. There was a large table in the Bombay High Court library where generally young lawyers would sit around waiting for work at a particular time of the day, because when there were small oral applications to be made, the clerks from the law firm would come around and offer those briefs to young counsel. And my recollection is that when there were 7 or 8 of us, or 9 of us sitting at the table, all contemporaries and very young counsel, no matter in what sequence we sat, the clerk would go around to all the young men. And if all of them said no, then I would be the counsel of last resort. And there were no pretenses about it. That was the way it was. I was fortunate enough to have landed some good commercial work because by virtue of the chamber I was in. And the chamber sort of just exposed you to work, but as a counsel, you needed, to be remunerated and to appear in a case, you needed to be briefed yourself, whether it was with a senior or without. So I was, by virtue of being in that chamber, I did get exposure to some very good commercial work, but 3 years down the line, I was a parent. And that brought new challenges because, I was 27 years old and I was still trying to find myself, my feet in the profession. And there was this, new responsibility. And someone famously said, I think it was Indra Nui, who said that a woman's biological clock is always in conflict with her career clock, because the best years, perhaps for childbearing and raising, are the very years that are crucial for your trajectory as a lawyer. And those are really challenging times, and I really miss having, even at the Bombay bar, I cannot remember a single role model I could look up to and say that, here is a person who's been there, done that, and made a success of it. So it was there were times which were very, very frustrating. And this is not a profession that can, you don't go places anytime soon, even for the best of us and even for men. And when you are grappling with all of those challenges at the same time, and you think you're not making a success of either, you just wonder, what you're doing there. And I think it's very, very easy to sort of fall off the ladder and quit. But I remember coming back 3 months later, exactly 3 months after my child was born, But it wasn't a job, so there was no work waiting for me. Had I been in a law firm, perhaps somebody would have thrown some work at me and said, go right ahead. But this was counsel practice, and so I found that the briefs that I had held before had been naturally redistributed to other young counsel, and I had to wait for the next brief to arrive, and that took about 5 months of being there every day. And it was a challenge because, I had this beautiful baby at home who wanted me and needed me, and, there was the High Court, which didn't seem to want me or need me at the time. So it was a tough call to just hang in there. And I think at some stage, I think that if one is not a quitter, I think one has sort of, made some success of it. I think tenacity is probably, one of the biggest assets that a woman should have in the legal profession. And it's not very different anywhere else in the world. One of my contemporaries from Cambridge, she worked in a fabulous law firm in New York, and she seemed to have this really good job. And then when she had her first child, it was 3 days off a week. But very soon she found she was taken off the cutting edge work. And by the time she had her second child, it just wasn't worth being there. So, maternity leave, when we talk about it, it's not about just the 3 months or the 4 months that you take off. It's the impact which that is going to have. This is the perception in the mind of the solicitor. This is not someone who's going to be able to last it out. This is someone whose mind is beset with so many different things that she's not going to be able to do justice to my brief. And you cannot blame a solicitor for then opting for your male counterpart, who he thinks is going to be much more dedicated to the brief. So I think women have got to think about how to, overcome those challenges. But when I had these gaps, the first was of 5 months, but it shrunk over time. But I used those gaps by beginning to write. And while my male colleagues might have been busy with some small appearance or the other every day, I decided to, I was spending my time putting together articles, and eventually that yielded a book. And in the meantime, of course, work got, practice also got somewhat better. So I think, a disadvantage at a certain level turned into an advantage. And I think there is therefore, there are silver linings in so many situations. The one thing I'd like to say that I always wanted to be a mainstream lawyer, and in fact, when this, there was an award, the Woman Lawyer of the Year, which I happened to get at the hands of Justice Sikri, who is here today. And the first thing that my response was I never saw myself as a woman lawyer. I saw myself as a lawyer. I wanted to do, I continue to do regular mainstream work. And I think that when women choose family law, it should be because they want to do family law, not because they think they're not going to face competition for, So I think that's one thing that and I also wonder whether as women we support other women, younger women at the bar. And here I'd just like to say that Justice Malhotra has been really sterling in this department. I think the manner in which she has mentored other young practitioners, it's something quite fabulous. I'm not sure all women are so helpful to other women at the bar, and this is really something we should think about. Let's not just blame the men. I think as there are enough women out there as AORs, and we really need to see whether we are supporting one another. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful, thank you. And I hope all the young women in the room remember that advice. Tenacity, there's nothing quite like it. How about this? I'm doing a terrible job in pronouncing names. I do apologize. Lavanya Rajamani?
That's perfect. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, Professor Richardson. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here this evening and to be part of this very distinguished panel. Others on this panel have spoken very eloquently about the challenges of being a woman in a very demanding legal profession. And what struck me both with Justice Malhotra's sort of remarks and Madhavi's remarks is that these are women, to be successful in these fields, we've all leaned in, as it were, as Sheryl Sandberg would put in her book. And surely I've done that too. I think we all have. But what's interesting to me is that it takes the onus off institutional structures in a sense and puts the onus on us to lean in, to be tenacious, to look at that silver lining and to work harder and harder and to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have to send your child to school at 6:45, you wake up at 3 to write your book, and I've done that. So I think all of us have leaned in a way, and that's fantastic. And given there aren't going to be overnight changes in societal structures, maybe that is what we need to do. But having said that, I think we shouldn't take the onus of institutional structures and societal structures to change and to look for systemic changes as well that enable women to participate without having to lean in to this extent, because we're actually, if you look at the statistics, the latest World Economic Forum report on the latest World Economic Forum report on gender gap actually found that India has the worst gap in terms of gender chores, in that women spend 7 times as much time on household tasks as men do. And definitely, this changes over socioeconomic strata. This ratio does change. And the women on this panel are probably not spending 7 times as much as men on household tasks. But nevertheless, the disparity continues, especially, as Madhavi pointed out, especially once you have children in the mix. I'm sure in the hour and a half that I've been on this panel, that I've been here, I've got 20 WhatsApp messages about play dates and Lego classes and rescheduling, PTMs. Which is not what typically most men academics face when they're gone or out of academics or professionals face when they're out of pocket for an hour and a half. But this is off the cuff. What I actually wanted to say is that in my own experience, having worked 15 years in legal academia, but also as an international legal practitioner, working with the UN, with governments, working on treaty law and drafting treaty text, which is what I do, I have often found myself to be the only woman at the table. To take a stark example from my academic career, 10 years ago I taught at a university in Japan. I was the only woman on the law faculty across all levels of academic hierarchy. There were no women teaching, and I was quite the curiosity. Students flocked to my class because they'd never seen a woman teach a course. And I've found this even in my international legal practice. When I've worked as part of small UN teams drafting treaty text, including the Paris Agreement. I was part of the small core drafting team for that. I was the only woman, the only lawyer, and the only woman from a developing country, only person from a developing country. All of this actually points to a larger sort of systemic issue, I think, that at top rungs of legal academia, legal profession, legal consulting, it is predominantly male. And gender biases are pervasive, and they're implicit and explicit. But gender biases are pervasive, and they're sort of systemically disempowering to women and lead to a considerable marginalization of women, whether it's in legal academia or a legal profession or even in legal consulting. The good news, which Justice Sikri also sort of mentioned initially in his remarks, is that we do find the gender balance shifting, at least in law faculties. So that among the top 5 law faculties in India, 40% of the faculties are actually female. And this is certainly, in terms of intake, women enroll at the same levels or even higher levels than men, as Justice Sikri pointed out. And even in terms of performance, they outperform the men quite often. My research assistant, Lavanya, just graduated from National Law School last week. I'm tremendously proud of her. She graduated with 13 gold medals. So that's, and that's the level at which women are performing. But unfortunately, that's where the good news ends, because you then find that at higher levels, at positions of prestige, positions of power, there are very few women. There are about 3 to 5% of vice chancellors in India are women, and many of these are vice chancellors of all women universities. For full professorships across the top 5 law schools in India, about 25% are women. But even, which sounds good, but if you look at some of the law schools, in particular the National Law School, for instance, by many accounts, one of the best law schools in the country, only 2 of 15 full professors are women. Jindal Global Law School, it has none of its 8 full professors are women. There's a story there, and I'm happy to go into it in a minute. But it's interesting that none of its full professors are women. In conversations with the Vice Chancellor of General Global Law School, I understand that not a single woman applied for any of the professorships. There are a whole host of reasons for this. Certainly, the confidence gap, which a lot of women experience and have to deal with, is a big feature of this. Confidence gap in that study after study has told us that confidence is as important as competence in this field and in every field. And men, for various structural, patriarchal reasons, tend to be a lot more confident than women do. And so they apply for jobs that are clearly out of their league. They take risks, which women tend not to do. They apply for jobs that are perhaps below their level of competence. So to be able to bridge that confidence gap and apply for professorships, I would really like to encourage younger women here to bridge that confidence gap, aim high, apply for things that you think are out of your league. They probably aren't. And be prepared to be a role model in various ways. And also to talk about something that Madhavi raised at the end, mentorship. I think another way of addressing many of these issues is to actually focus on mentorship. So when you do have women in positions of power, and there are very few of them, and we need to find ways of addressing that, when you do find women in positions of power and prestige, these are women who need to be mentors to younger women in the profession and in academia. And I'm part of various mentorship programs. I was actually surprised that I was a mentor, not a mentee, so time passes quickly. But I'm part of various groups. As an international lawyer, I'm part of a group called Atlas, which has 6,000 members on Facebook. It's a group of women working in the field of international law that provides support, advice, mentorship to each other, that helps cite each other. There's systematic biases in the way that women are cited. You could be writing the most brilliant articles, but students and your peers are much more likely to cite you if you're male. And there's study after study that's demonstrated that. So women do need to provide mentorship to each other, do need to support each other, cite each other, showcase each other's work. Another consequence of actually having very few women at top rungs in legal academia and in the legal profession and legal consulting is the issue of gatekeeper bias, which essentially means if there are people in positions of authority, they're in a position to actually prevent other groups from achieving their full potential. And this happens at formal levels, of course, in formal hiring practices. Predominantly male committees tend to choose predominantly men, but at least in formal processes, there are ways of restricting that because you have requirements for instance, requirements that there should be female representation on these committees. And I found as a fledgling academic, my first academic job in Cambridge, I was asked to be part of the appointments committee at Queen's College. And I was literally, that was my first academic job, but there were so few women academics, they wanted women academic representation on these appointments committees. There are, however, more subtle and insidious ways in which this gatekeeper bias functions as well. So gender bias creeps in the phenomena that, now controversial phenomena of manels, having sort of conference after conference where you have an array of male speakers. The more men you see at conferences, the more likely it is that those men will get invited to other conferences. More likely it is that they will succeed at networking, the kind of thing that Justice Malhotra pointed out, women are typically not comfortable with, but that's what it takes, even in academia, to network. And the men are everywhere. They're appointed by men, and they create a cycle of visibility and success. And these very same processes actually invisibilize women. So we need to fight against that as well. And even often, when women are invited to speak, they are interrupted and patronized. I recall one panel discussion that I was at where a panelist, male, needless to say, interrupted me to say, which something that would sound like a compliment, it really wasn't, is to say, "Lavanya, you're so pretty, I would never expected you to be this intelligent." And this was on a panel discussion. It was not a compliment. It's a way of undermining my academic credibility, intellectual rigor, and drawing attention to my physical attributes. And that is not something that women benefit from in professional circles at all. There are, of course, a whole host of other sort of issues with women, so few women in top rungs of legal academia as in every other field, but I'd be happy to discuss that in greater detail in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Notorious. Thank you. That's easy.
Good evening to all of you. Let me start with a story from Madras, it's now called Chennai. In 1920, we had the first law graduate of Madras University. Her name was Anandi Bai. The story goes that she applied to be enrolled in the bar. The registrar was completely flummoxed. She was an ICS officer, didn't know what to do. So the registrar put up the file to the Chief Justice of the Madras High Court. He didn't know what to do. So he put up the file to the Governor of Madras. He didn't know what to do. So he sent the file back to the registrar. And the story goes that the registrar was pondering as to what to do and finally wrote a long letter to the lady and said that most of the men lawyers in the High Court don't have work, so what's the point of your joining the bar? So anyway, ultimately she apprenticed with the great V. Srinivasa Iyengar. And the first lady advocate in Madras was in 1933. She was the daughter of a judge, Justice Devdas's daughter. But it's very interesting to know that the Calcutta High Court and the Patna High Court had officially held in judgments that the term legal practitioner will not include a woman lawyer. And that was why in 1923, they had the Legal Practitioners Amendment Act in 1923, which specifically said that legal practitioners include women. So this was the thing just about 95 years ago. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as Justice Sikri mentioned, from what I see in Law College in 1980, 1976 to 79 when I was at the Madras Law College, and what I see now, there's a huge difference in the number of lady students. We get 2 interns a month. So I get 24 interns approximately in a year. And I'm happy to say that the vast majority by application are women. We only say that you should have finished the 4th year, you should have done some course in taxation, otherwise they'll be wasting time at my office in internship. And it is very, very gratifying to note that girls from Punjab, from Delhi, from Assam, they come to Madras, they take up accommodation in a paying guest and they work. That shows their interest and dedication in learning law in different high courts. Now, what I was talking to friends for this seminar, what I find is the number of lawyers practicing, counsel practice is substantially less. But the statistics which I've been told that in the law firms, that as many as 50% and more are women in terms of, right from the lowest lawyer to the senior partners, the majority are women. The same thing is in the CA profession. I was also taking a parallel with the chartered accountant profession. Most of them join firms. Very few chartered accountants are in independent practice because of long working hours and so on. And there's also one indication, you see, one advantage of crossing the age of 60 is you get invited to be the chief guest at some prize distribution ceremony. So I was invited to give prizes to rank holders in Chartered Accountancy Institute at the Madras Institute. The top 3 people who came had all joined public sector undertakings. And over the tea, when I asked them that why aren't you joining independent practice or work at a firm and set up your own practice as a chartered accountant, they said that as a woman, it makes more sense for us to join the public sector undertaking where the hours of work are fixed. We don't have to work beyond 6, we can go home and so on. So this is, life is unfair. I mean, whatever you say for a woman lawyer, it is very, very tough. And I'm really congratulate Madhavi, Divan, Justice Malhotra, Lavanya for fighting all the odds and doing so well. It's a very, very difficult struggle. In terms of statistics, we say that how many women are judges. I think we have to we have to find out how many women join the bar and what is the attrition rate, how many continue in the profession. And I find that a large number of attrition takes place because of the challenges of motherhood, raising a family, and we Indian men are to blame. We don't take enough responsibility. That's also, and unless there's a huge family support system, it's very, very difficult for them to continue as counsel practice. And as I said, practicing as a counsel practice, actually you work in 2 shifts. From 10 to 5 you're in the courts, and in the evenings you're preparing for the next day's work. So it's really a double whammy as far as women are concerned. The other point which I wanted to mention was that I had the privilege of starting my career with a lady lawyer, Mrs. Ramani Natarajan, and she's a part of a role model. She joined the bar, and she had a difficult 2 pregnancies, so she took time off. She took time off for 8 years, and when the children were sufficiently old enough to manage on their own, she rejoined the bar, and then she set up a very successful practice, and she was my mentor, and I owe a lot to her as well. So there is a good example where she took time off and again came back to the bar and set up a counsel practice in Madras. Now, what is the way forward? I mean, we know all the points. So what do we do? Should we have some kind of affirmative action plan that we say, all right, 1/3 the number of judges, or what do we do to increase the representation? And do we take representation on the basis of the number of lawyers in litigation? Do you take a percentage of that, or you take the total percentage of lawyers? Something has to be done. I mean, we can keep debating about the difficulties women face, but what is the affirmative action program that we have got? I think there's definitely going to be greater representation. When I joined the bar, there was no, I think Justice Fatima Bibi at that time was the lady judge. Now we have 3 judges. I have no doubt that if you come 5 or 10 years down the line, at least there'll be 7 to 8 or even 10 judges of Supreme Court. I have no doubt in my mind. The way I see the younger people coming, there's going to be a greater and greater percentage of the number of judges. Madras High Court today has almost as many as 13 lady judges. So high percentage of the lady lawyers, and all of them have come on merit because they had good practice in the court and they have come up. So I think, in a sense, Achhe Din are there for the profession on merit, and I think we're going to have more and more things. But at the same time, somebody, either the Supreme Court Collegium or the High Court judges, they must have a positive affirmative action to keep looking for lady lawyers. And one thing, what happens is, we don't look beyond the high courts. In the courts, we often overlook the districts where there are competent lady lawyers. Say, for example, I speak from Madras High Court. I've been to Madurai, I've been to Coimbatore. They're very competent, but they don't get noticed because they're not in the High Court. So there should be some kind of plan or affirmative action where you look for very, very competent people and take them into the judiciary. And as far as the lady lawyers are concerned, I spoke to a lot of people. They said there's very poor infrastructure support in terms of creche, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of facilities, and so on and so forth. That also each high court can take up and make sure that there is a creche, there is facilities. Now, I don't think all the high courts have creches, only some of them have got. So these are all the steps where you can encourage women, make it easier for them to take up counsel practice and make life easy for them. So these are all the points I wanted to mention. Yeah, and when I was doing this research, I found it, you're all talking about the low representation of women. And ironically, we only talk of goddess of justice. If you go to Greek mythology, Themis is the goddess of justice. She's the wife of Zeus, and then her 2 daughters, Dike and Astra, they were taken as goddess of justice. In Roman law, you have Justitia, who's supposed to be the goddess of justice, blindfolded, and one sword, double-edged sword, which represents reason and justice. So it's rather ironical that we talk of goddesses of justice, but on the ground, we don't give them enough of opportunities. Thank you. Exactly, and I think that Justice Sikri says the goddess, the supreme learning is Saraswati, goddess of justice. There is no man who's.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid Justice Malhotra has to leave now, so if you could join me in thanking her for her. I'm very keen to pick up on the last point that Mr. Datar raised, which is we've heard some riveting personal accounts, some keen analysis of systemic problems, but I'm conscious of all the young women in the room, and I wonder if we could focus for a few minutes on what positive things we can do to improve the situation. All of you have acknowledged that there has been great change. The descriptions you provide of a pyramid-shaped profession actually apply to almost all professions in almost all countries. So progress has been made, but what else can we do practically, just picking up on your last point? So I'm going to give Mahindra and Lavanya a moment to think about that while I invite Justice Sikri just to reflect on what you've heard.
You see, I think this is very good point which is made by Mr. Datar and about affirmative action. We may keep recognizing the merit of women, but if we don't give them their legitimate due, then what's the use of this discussion? Now, at what level and in what context and what should be the modus of doing so is a challenge. As I said, when we talk about the judicial service at the lowest level in India, where it is a competitive examination. They are able to prove their worth, and they are coming in large number, women, and they are outnumbering male. They are outnumbering male counterparts, and therefore, if we see the judiciary, at least I can say from as far as Delhi is concerned, or Punjab or Haryana, these states are concerned, where I have been. In last 5 years or 7 years, those who are appointed as judges, I think female judges are much more than male judges, who have been able to come on their own merits. So therefore, nobody can check at that level. I would say the challenge is at the level of High Court and the Supreme Court, as far as judges are concerned. Let me tell you one, and here are, before I come to one anecdote I wanted to say, but then we have to see what is our system. Today, in High Court and Supreme Court, the judges are appointed. We have a collegium system. That is the 3 senior most judges in the... Today, as I said, in last 6 or 7 years, if you see, there may be 60% female judges today. If you see only those judges who have come in last 7 years, only them, and don't take the judges who are older. And if that is the position there, and they can be there on their own merit, why not in the High Court and Supreme Court also? So therefore, my view is that merit has to be recognized. And yes, going by what suggestion Mr. Datar has given, I think at least Supreme Court I am going to put it. I am in collegium now. That look, try to have some kind of mechanism where women of equal merit should be given preference. Yes. That should be, and let us see how it can be worked.
Thank you very much. I'm very conscious, I've told the audience we will open this to the floor, and I'm not sure at what time the panel has to end, and I'm hoping somebody will tell me. 20 minutes? Okay. But I do want to get a couple of positive suggestions from the panel, lest the audience think we're being too negative. What things can we do? We've heard some wonderful suggestions. We've heard about creches. My own experience is that it is precisely the point that the time to really make your career coincides with the time to have children. So my own view is the reason in professions beyond the law for there to be fewer women is precisely the difficulty of combining a family with a career. But I'd love to hear some positive suggestions of things we should do. What do you think?
Well, I think as far as judgeship is concerned, I think we're definitely going to have more women judges in the years to come. There is a consciousness. And I am personally not in favor of affirmative action, because I think as a woman, I would say that we don't want tokenism. I think it's because we haven't had too many women judges, particularly in the Supreme Court, we want those who go up there to be exceptional in every way. So therefore, I mean, I am very wary of affirmative action. I mean, the NJSC, which got struck down, of course, had, 2 of the members were meant to be eminent persons, one of whom was supposed to be a member of either the scheduled caste or tribe or a woman. And the idea was to encourage diversity in appointments. So if you have to choose from, say, an upper caste male candidate versus a woman who may or may not, whatever the caste, that you would give preference to the woman. But I'm not sure that always happens, because this is still a not so transparent system. It's not a publicly declared process, and therefore, as Mr. Datar says, sometimes you have very good practitioners in the districts who don't even get a chance to be noticed or considered. But that's about judges. I mean, I would be more concerned actually on the other side, which is on the practitioner's side, because you will eventually be designating more women. All that has, it has happened and it will continue to happen, but that still does not ensure that the real meat comes to the women. Right? So, and I think there are no easy answers there. because I mean it's just a complex set of factors where I think yes, women get thrown off a little bit because of parenthood and work-life balance, etc. But it's also, I think the bar has got to push women a little more, because I mean, having worked in the Bombay High Court, I worked with some of the best commercial practitioners, and I have to confess that the women did not come anywhere close in either performance or competence to the men. I mean, that's the truth we must acknowledge, and we must examine, has that happened because there is just not enough opportunity, and opportunity itself will beget more confidence and experience and confidence. Is that the reason, or is it more than that? The other thing is that speaking for myself, when I grew up in a liberal family, I went to a very good university, all of that, but nobody made me aware of the challenges in a very mainstream career. So, you just had to learn by yourself on the job. And I think it can be made easier for younger women if you're just made aware a little bit, maybe even at the, and men should be educated too on this. So I think the sensitization should begin at a much, perhaps in law college or even before that. The challenges which you're likely to meet in a mainstream profession. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Madhavi, I'm only responding to what you said. You are not in favor of affirmative action. I think what was told by Mr. Datar was, and which I think modulated also and rather tweaked also to that extent. If you remember my words, I said, if there are women available on merits, then they should not be, only avoided because they are women. So therefore, to that extent, affirmative action. That is what I was.
Yeah, I must first say sorry to Madhavi. When I said affirmative action, I did not mean in the Bake sense of the US Supreme Court. Yes, I didn't mean that. So what I meant was a positive step you must take. Yes. So I'm sorry. Yes. I have got one practical thing which I'm an amicus in a matter in the Supreme Court. See, there are about 1,000 High Court judges totally, but there are 20,000 district and subordinate judges, more than 20,000. So the chance of women recruitment is better at a lower level. I've been advancing the point, at least say, for example, district judges, 25% are on merit. Now, why can't you have, it's very difficult to have an All India Judicial Service because of Article 312. So that is practically out. Why can't you have a system of a common entrance exam which is fixed? Now, what happens in Madras High Court, for example, is in October they say there's going to be entrance in December. Then there is no entrance for 2 years. So you don't get the best possible talent. So one thing I've suggested is, like the IAS of exam, you have an exam every 1st of May, there is an exam for recruitment.
Only I'm just cutting it short, and that is in the mind of the present Chief Justice who took oath yesterday, and he told us today in the morning he's going to have video conference with all the Chief Justices and going to emphasize this. If you remember, Mazhar Sultan is a judgment of the Supreme Court.
Yes.
There are 5,000 vacancies today.
Yes.
And his words were, I don't know whether I should share it here or not. He said, I am going to give my peace of mind to all these Chief Justices in the High Court.
But I'll tell.
And it is going to be at least, he is going to enforce that Mazhar Sultan, all those
parameters.
Timelines which were fixed there are to be scrupulously and strictly followed.
I'll also mention, because we had this amicus hearing when Justice Keher was the Chief Justice and I was amicus, and we sent notices to all the High Courts for this common entrance exam. Most High Courts first felt that their autonomy is going to be lost. They have got the right to choose. West Bengal and some of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh opposed, particularly because they said they will not be able to compete on a national level. So what we suggested was, let each state conduct its own competitive exam, but have it at a fixed time. Everybody knows that it's on 1st May, so I start preparing. I decide to go for a judicial career, and then I choose that. So I thought if more women ultimately get recruited at the judicial level, 40% of the promotees to the High Court, recruitment High Court, is from the district bar. So over the years, you'll have a huge number of women who will come to the High Court through the district judiciary. Of course, there'll be people like Madhavi and so on who have done very well on the law side, and maybe they'll be elevated from the, just give an example.
No, as far as Madhavi's, let me share one thing. Now I can, because the matter is over. She was saying that insofar as commercial matters are concerned, but she herself is an outstanding lawyer on commercial side. She had argued one case under the Competition Act, which was very difficult case, and in spite of one of my judgments earlier on the issue, and I delivered that verdict yesterday only in her favor.
Just briefly on the issues that Madhavi raised, I would of course completely agree with her. I'm as much against tokenism as everybody else, but I don't think affirmative action equals tokenism. I think there are ways of implementing affirmative action with outreach, which also Mr. Datar mentioned. There are lots of excellent women at various sort of levels that are invisible, and we need to find them and we need to reward them. And I think that is the only way, in some respects, we're going to have enough people at top, enough women at the top rungs of every sort of area, whether it's legal academia or the legal profession. But having said that, and also actually to your point about not finding women competent enough in the legal profession, I certainly can't speak to that since I'm not a part of the legal profession, the practice of law, but this has not been my experience in legal academia. My experience has been to find outstanding women who think that they're less outstanding than they are and who need to be recognized because they're outstanding. My experience has been that there are women who are too diffident and underconfident. There's a significant confidence gap, but the gap is not in competence. The competence is exceptional. And to come back to actually the question that Professor Richardson asked, some positive points to take away, how we might actually make some changes. I think as far as academia is concerned, and this is, of course, very hard to implement as far as the legal profession is concerned, but legal academia, I think moving away from a work environment where expectations are pegged to presence and to long hours, and expectation is actually pegged to performance and productivity is incredibly enabling for women. I have found that is what we do at the Center for Policy Research. We have flexible hours. If I'm writing a book, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I pick up my child at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from school. And that is incredibly enabling to women to be able to balance so that the kinds of challenges that work and life throws one's way. So focusing on performance and productivity and not on networking and presence is tremendously important, I think, and enabling. And of course, we need systemic changes and societal changes. But since that's not going to happen overnight, I think we do, and I mentioned this before, the women in this audience and the young women, I would tell everybody, lean in to the extent that you can. Say yes to opportunities, aim high, and get help. Get help from other women, get help from mentors, men and women, and perform to the extent that you can, and that will get you opportunities. Opportunities will bring you more opportunities, and that will bring you success. Do things that you're passionate about, and you will do it well, and you will succeed. So just go out there and do it.
Well, that was a very positive way to end that. Thank you. I did promise you a Q&A, and we haven't much time, and I'm sorry, but the presentations were so riveting, I couldn't shorten them. So I'm going to take a few questions from the floor before asking the panelists to give some final comments. And I see, yeah. So I think we'd take a few in a row if you don't mind. But why don't you identify yourself?
Speak loudly.
Well, we can hear you.
Fine.
We can hear you.
You're fine. It's
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Sumitra, working as assistant professor in Amity Law School, Noida. So, ma'am, I'm trying to open up a research center wherein I want to guide the women. So, one of the outcomes of the research would be to skill the women. As a legal academic, ma'am, I would like to have an insight of the learned panel. What are the areas wherein I, as a woman in the legal profession, can contribute more to my research center? How can I help more women to add value and skills to their life and contribute to the cause of the nation?
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a few more questions and then we'll invite the panel. Yes, right there. Your chances of getting a question would be much better if you get a hold of a microphone. So, yes.
So a very important structural question that was not asked was about lack of sexual harassment inquiry cells in a lot of high courts and local courts. And it was very late that even Bhanwari Devi judgment was followed in the Supreme Court. So I really request Justice A.K. Sikri to ask the CJI to take it up and so that it goes across to the lowest level of the judiciary, because that is one of the most important factors that deters women and that does not ensure that security that perhaps your wife's father didn't feel in the profession.
Thank you very much. Somebody over there have a microphone, please.
It's not really a question, it's a comment, and I would see if the panel could also throw a light. A very interesting comment was given by Indu. She said that if you really want to have a great career, then the biggest lesson that she would like to give is choose the right man. Because if you do that, then everything else gets sorted.
I can tell you it helps.
I would agree.
Me too.
I think choosing the right wife also is important.
Less important than choosing the right man.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, yes. My name is Sangam Singh and I'm practicing in Delhi right now as an advocate. So my simple recommendation to all the practitioners, women practitioners who are there in India right now, like the women lawyers who are on their maternity leave and they take off for around 8 years or months, as Mr. Datta sir told that his mentor, she took around 8 years of rest time. So my simple...
she's teaching part-time in the law college. She left the profession, was teaching part-time.
So my simple suggestion here is, why can't we use video conferencing and can, inhale their all such legal acumen at that time also from their home or from other places, so that they can contribute from their end, whether they're at home or other places, and we can, join courts with their accessibility so that they can contribute at that level.
Thank you. I think we should take 2 more questions and then we'll invite the panels. Yes.
Good evening. I'm a journalist, and my question was primarily for Justice Indu Malhotra, but I would be obliged if Justice Sikri answers this question. Recently, when Justice Malhotra delivered the dissenting verdict in the Sabarimala case, the popular perception was the only female judge did not stand up for gender equality. When I talk about gender equality, I talk about the popular perception, especially in the media and the common mass. How difficult it is for a judge to balance his or her gender with the substance of the verdict she is delivering, because her dissenting verdict actually went into areas that we later pondered upon, but the first reaction was that the only female judge did not stand up for women's rights. So if Justice Sikri could throw some light on that.
Well, that's really a question for the justice who's not here, so you have to comment on that.
My name is Ajay Verma. I'm a practicing lawyer in Delhi, and wanted to, thanks to this young man, he has raised a very important issue, and I would like to request Honorable Justice Sikri sir also, that the sensitization should not be limited to the judges or judiciary, for the lower court lawyers. Because I have come across with my colleagues when we have gone to various district courts also in Haryana and other states, I found there is a practice where the female lawyers are not motivated. The local lawyer may not be happy to interact with the female lawyer. When my colleague, female lawyer, was there with me, she was not given much importance. So I think that's the importance today, that in the bars, with the involvement of bar associations, we can do that sensitization for the...
Thank you. Well, we have 7 questions there, so I'm afraid I think that's really all we can realistically take, and I will invite the panel to pick up whichever ones they'd like. So the questions I have are what to do, how to help women, for the woman who's setting up the Centre for the Research on Women,
can, and that will get you opportunities. Opportunities will bring you more opportunities, and that will bring you success. Do things that you're passionate about, and you will do it well, and you will succeed. So just go out there and do it.
Well, that was a very positive way to end that. Thank you. I did promise you a Q&A, and we haven't much time, and I'm sorry, but the presentations were so riveting, I couldn't shorten them. So I'm going to take a few questions from the floor before asking the panelists to give some final comments. And I see, yeah. So I think we'd take a few in a row if you don't mind. But why don't you identify yourself?
Speak loudly.
Well, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
You're fine.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Sumitra, working as assistant professor in Amity Law School, Noida. So, ma'am, I'm trying to open up a research center wherein I want to guide the women. So, one of the outcomes of the research would be to skill the women. As a legal academic, ma'am, I would like to have an insight of the learned panel. What are the areas wherein I, as a woman in the legal profession, can contribute more to my research center? How can I help more women to add value and skills to their life and contribute to the cause of the nation?
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a few more questions and then we'll invite the panel. Yes, right there. Your chances of getting a question would be much better if you get a hold of a microphone. So, yes.
So a very important structural question that was not asked was about lack of sexual harassment inquiry cells in a lot of high courts and local courts. And it was off very late that even Bhanwari Devi judgment was followed in the Supreme Court. So I really request Justice A.K. Sikri to ask the CJI to take it up and so that it goes across to the lowest level of the judiciary, because that is one of the most important factors that deters women and that does not ensure that security that perhaps your wife's father didn't feel in the profession.
Thank you very much. Somebody over there have a microphone, please?
It is not really a question, it's a comment, and I would see if the panel could also throw a light. A very interesting comment was given by Indra Nui. She said that if you really want to have a great career, then the biggest lesson that she would like to give is choose the right man. Because if you do that, then everything else gets sorted.
I can tell you it helps. I would agree.
Me too.
I think choosing the right wife also is important.
Less important than choosing the right man.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, yes. My name is Sangam Singh and I'm practicing in Delhi right now as an advocate. So my simple recommendation to all the practitioners, women practitioners who are there in India right now, like the women lawyers who are on their maternity leave and they take off for around 8 years or months, as Mr. Datar sir told that his mentor, she took around 8 years of rest time. So my simple...
she's teaching part-time in the law college. She left the profession, was teaching part-time.
So my simple suggestion here is, why can't we use video conferencing and can, inhale their all such legal acumen at that time also from their home or from other places, so that they can contribute from their end, whether they're at home or other places, and we can, join courts with their accessibility so that they can contribute at that level.
Thank you. I think we should take 2 more questions and then we'll invite the panelists. Yes.
Good evening. I'm a journalist, and my question was primarily for Justice Indu Malhotra, but I would be obliged if Justice Sikri answers this question. Recently, when Justice Malhotra delivered the dissenting verdict in the Sabarimala case, the popular perception was the only female judge did not stand up for gender equality. When I talk about gender equality, I talk about the popular perception, especially in the media and the common mass. How difficult it is for a judge to balance his or her gender with the substance of the verdict she is delivering, because her dissenting verdict actually went into areas that we later pondered upon, but the first reaction was that the only female judge did not stand up for women's rights. So if Justice Sikri could throw some light on that.
Well, that's really a question for the justice who's not here, so you have to comment on it.
My name is Ajay Verma. I'm a practicing lawyer in Delhi, and wanted to thanks to this young man. He has raised a very important issue, and I would like to request Honorable Justice Sikri sir also that the sensitization should not be limited to the judges or judiciary, for the lower court lawyers. Because I have come across with my colleagues when we have gone to various district courts also in Haryana and other states, I found there is a practice where the female lawyers are not motivated. The local lawyer may not be happy to interact with the female lawyer. When my colleague female lawyer was there with me, she was not given much importance. So I think that's the importance today, that in the bars, with the involvement of bar associations, we can do that sensitization for the...
Thank you. Well, we have 7 questions there, so I'm afraid I think that's really all we can realistically take, and I will invite the panel to pick up whichever ones they'd like. So the questions I have are what to do, how to help women, for the woman who's setting up the Centre for the Research on Women,
courts or places where they may not have had that much professional interaction with women, that they are necessarily more sexist than other men. I mean, I practice, as I said, in the Bombay High Court, and it really threw me how men who had who had interacted in the most elite and liberal of circles, were extremely sexist in their approaches to women. And I'll give you a very small example. I mean, this is a top practitioner in Bombay whom I otherwise admire very, very much, and I've learned a lot from. But when I was in the Bombay High Court, and I happened to be in the High Court library, we hung out between cases over there. And he came up to me one day and he said, well, I haven't seen you around for a couple of days. And I was actually very flattered that this very senior gentleman hadn't seen me for a couple of days, and he noticed that. And I said, well, I was in arbitration for the last couple of days. And he said, oh, I thought you'd say you were spending a little time with your children. And that really stung. And I didn't expect it from him. So, I think that sexism pervades, they feel you have no business to be there. I mean, I'm talking when my children were very young. They feel you have no need to be there because, you have a breadwinner out there, and therefore you need to justify your presence over there. So I think, we need to weed this out from men's minds and sometimes from women's minds as well. So I think for both men, women, and at all levels, we need much more sensitization.
Thank you very much. To Sikri.
Yeah. You see, as far as this sensitization is concerned, I would say that yes, that is required, and this is again maybe a sort of long drawn process. This is not something which can be achieved overnight, as you rightly mentioned about societal norms, etc., which have to be changed. And as I also hinted, mindset has to be changed. But yes, there's no harm in, giving sensitization, doing sensitization exercises at bar associations level, and maybe this at district court level, at district judges, etc., who are doing it. One problem is there, which becomes more difficult insofar as legal profession is concerned, as was told to you by Justice Indu Malhotra also in the beginning, that look, legal profession is such which needs or which demands very, very long hours, number one, and number two, even odd hours. Now, see, for example, a particular firm of lawyers which is doing work for some American firm, where the work is outsourced and they are doing. We have seen those lawyers are sitting in their office till wee hours, because that is a time when it is 12 in the night or 1 or 2 in the night, then it is a day in US, and they want as per their timings. So therefore women lawyers are also there at that time sitting. And likewise, I would say to some extent, even I don't know whether they say it or not, in district courts, even female judges, few cases have come up, whether female judges also may be facing such a problem. And therefore, some kind of corrective measures have to be taken. At what level and all, because ultimately, as it is said, it's a mindset which is to change. And maybe this is one area where if somebody is found to be a culprit, a very, very stern action is needed in those cases, just as by way of deterrence as well. So these are some of the aspects which need to be taken. And I would only add, as far as the other aspect, that women, when she is on maternity leave, etc., very rightly said, this and plus choosing the right man, they, I think, go together. And today is the time which Rajamani also said, that look, the male counterpart, the husbands, they have also to share the responsibility at that time. In India, I am happy to note that it is happening now. I see in my own son, because my son is also a lawyer, my daughter-in-law is also a lawyer, and I have a 4.5 years old granddaughter, and how he is helping. And because of that, my daughter-in-law is in active profession again. I mean, within few months she could go back, and I think he's sharing the as far as parental work is concerned almost equally. But still, hats off to my daughter-in-law. And I say that, yes, as you rightly said, at 3 o'clock sometimes in the morning you have to get up. She is one person who has to drop her child to the school. Early morning she has to get up. She will go, come back and do so many things. And when she is preparing also. But then many times I have seen that she is, if she has to prepare a particular case and she is preparing, and my son, although he is also a lawyer, sometimes he'll take time out and is taking care of the baby. So this has to be done. But there's one thing more in this, that even when a person, a lady is on maternity leave, so to say, and from profession, in today's world there are so many other things which can be done. Maybe video conferencing, if that is not possible, but then if she is working in an office, sitting in her house, she can prepare the draft pleadings on a computer. She can get, whenever she gets time for this purpose. I give you another example. There was one law clerk who had worked with me when I was in the High Court. Then she appeared in judicial service examination. Of course, from one angle, I found her very bright. She came to me and she said that I want to appear in judicial service. I want to be a judicial officer. I told her that, look, you are bright girl, and you join the profession, and from profession, and because from profession, if you come to judiciary, maybe at higher level, at High Court level, etc., you can come. But if you are starting at the lowest level, and it takes more than 30 years to become High Court judge, so that said, why you are wasting your talent and you spend some time in the profession first. But she said, no, I am a first timer, and therefore I don't want to take that risk. There are many times, because what you have to, choosing a right man, but choosing a right senior also in the beginning for women is very, very important. But then she gave birth to a child, 2 months, I think her child is 2 months old. And today only in the afternoon I was talking, because her husband is not well, so I was just asking how is he and all. So in that, in that talk, she was telling me that I was reading something and all, because although she can take leave for 6 months or 8 months or maybe 1 year maternity leave, she says, no, I have to go back within few months, because it's my career which is at stake. And I have been getting, because they for them, this ACR, etc., also for judicial officer A, and if I don't work for 1 year, then that would be a void created in my career. But then they can do, and she said that what I'm trying to do is I'm reading, I'm writing articles, etc. So these, if the judicial officer can do this kind of work, I think an advocate can also start doing, say, pleadings, etc., start preparing arguments, and she can give it in the office where she is working, that this is the work I have done.
Thank you very much. I'm going to invite our last two speakers to be concise, if you don't mind, because we're out of time.
No, I've no comments. I'm done.
I didn't mean that concise.
Because time is, because I said what I wanted to say. No, I didn't mean that. Yeah.
Actually, just briefly to say that I very much agree with Madhavi's. Sexism is all pervasive. But what we see in the courts is a microcosm of the wider society that we live in, and so those changes have to come, and they have to come over time. But I think probably if you get to the courts, it's probably too late actually at that stage, and the gender sensitization needs to happen in law schools and actually in schools. And that's actually how we're going to weed this out. Also on gender roles changing, I'm also delighted that gender roles are changing, like Justice Sikri pointed out. But in my experience, men are given far too much credit for doing far too little. and women are given far too little credit for doing a tremendous amount. So I'm a little skeptical about the gender balance and role playing changing that dramatically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a fabulous evening. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I hope you've learned as much as I have. So please join me in thanking our panelists.